You know, there's one somewhere.
Yeah, it is.
You know, once you're out with the other, this is.
Really happens at
Sure. Well, he's a fish for testing.
Yeah. Not.
So better ways. He kind of fluctuates. Rare.
Those, yeah, sure.
Justin do so well. Walk out. So it's just.
Values. Really, so it's, yes. We're really super. So.
15 years ago. he sure is. Yeah. And but is Jeff ready?
Yeah, he gave her the, okay. Like to call to order tonight's study session of November 27th, 2023 at 6:02 PM. Councilmember Stewart is absent. He called in. Do we have a motion to excuse him?
I make a motion to excuse Councilmember Stewart.
You have a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Councilmember Cole, motion by Councilmember Botetto. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, passes 100%. All right, so Councilmember Reed has showed up, so we are ready to go. First thing on my agenda is the oath of office for new sergeants getting sworn in. I'll call on Chief Marecki.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Mayor, Council, staff, and our distinguished guests tonight. Tonight truly marks a milestone in the history of not only the Sumner Police Department, but in the careers of three of our most dedicated public servants as we administer their oath of office and officially appoint them as new police sergeants. Few can argue that the role of a police sergeant is the most and influential position in any police organization. It can be both the most demanding and yet the most rewarding role in your entire professional careers. A police sergeant must be many things to many people: a coach, a counselor, a teacher, a disciplinarian, a mentor, and a gatekeeper. It's a seemingly paradoxical role, responsive to both management and those they supervise. The sergeant's position demands strong leadership, self-confidence, competence, diplomacy, and above all, an understanding of their influence upon their subordinates and the work of the department and the service we provide our community. Before they take their oath, I want to introduce each one of them to you. First, I'd like to have Officer Joe Boulay come up. Joe grew up in Wisconsin. Notice I said Wisconsin. Is that right, Joe? And enlisted in the Army in 1991 through 1998. He was a Special Forces engineer, sergeant, serving deployments in South Korea, Laos, Thailand, Indonesia, and around the US, and ultimately landing at Fort Lewis, Washington, place to which he calls home. He started his career with Sumner Police Department in March of 2020 and served on our regional clandestine lab team. He was a drug recognition expert for 10 years. And for lay people, that's an officer that's been trained to detect individuals impaired by drugs for traffic enforcement. And he was a field training officer for many, I don't even think we could even collectively remember how many years he's been a field training officer, training many departments over those 23 years. Joe lives in Tacoma, where he raised his three children, Richard, Renya, and Teresa. Next, I'd like to call up Marcus McDonald. Marcus was born in Seattle and grew up in the Renton area. Shortly after graduating high school, Marcus enlisted in the United States Army. After completing his basic training, he was stationed at Fort Lewis where he was assigned to the Second Ranger Battalion of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Marcus would go on to deploy 5 times in his first 4 years, 4 times to Afghanistan and once to Iraq. He served in various positions in the Second Ranger Battalion and received multiple promotions, including the rank of sergeant and non-commissioned officer. He received many awards and commendations for his service. Marcus honorably separated from active duty in January 2007, whereupon he embarked on his new career here with the Sumner Police Department. I might say a fitting career choice for Marcus, given that his mother was a career deputy with the King County Sheriff's Office. Marcus is one of our founding members of our peer support team and has been voted Officer of the Year 4 times by his peers. In addition to serving the Sumner community, Marcus devotes much of his time to coaching youth sports over the years. And I have to brag, earlier this year, his son won a state championship in his weight division, wrestling for Sumner High School. Marcus, his 2 children, and his wife, Dr. Ariana McDonald, reside in the city of Edgewood. I'd like to call up Justin Gregson. Justin was born and raised in Pierce County. At age 17, he joined the Army Reserves, where he served for the remainder of his high school. About 10 years, just kidding. He attended Pacific Lutheran University, where he met his wife, Afton. They've been married 14 years and have called Sumner home for the past 13. Justin graduated PLU with a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology with an emphasis in crime and deviance. After college, Justin began his law enforcement career with the Washington State Patrol as a trooper, serving District 1 in Pierce County for 3 years before he lateraled to the City of Federal Way Police Department. During his 8 years with the Federal Way Police Department, he served many roles. He was promoted corporal in 2018. He was on the Major Accident Investigation Team for 4 years. He was a field training officer for 5 years and trained over 30 student officers. He was a team leader for Federal Way's peer support team, a team leader for the Valley Disturbance Unit, and for the last year of his service at Federal Way, he served as a hostage negotiator. Justin loves the outdoors, has far too many hobbies than he has time for or can afford. In fact, in September, he's an avid rollerblader. In fact, in September, he completed an inline rollerblade marathon in under 2 hours. So, as I stated, the sergeant's position demands strong leadership, self-confidence, competence, diplomacy, and an understanding of the important work we do. These 3 officers before you tonight have demonstrated those characteristics through their service, and I have every confidence in their ability to be leaders in our department. With that, I'd like to call up Mayor Hayden to administer their oath of office that will be followed by the formal pinning of their badges.
All right. Please raise your right hand and say aye and state your name.
I, Joseph Braxton Dahl,
Do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I am a citizen of the United States of America
as a citizen of the United States of America,
and the state of Washington,
state of Washington,
that I will support the Constitution and laws of the United States
that I will support the Constitution and the laws of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
and will, to the best of my judgment,
and will, to the best of my judgment,
skill, and ability,
skill, and ability,
truly, faithfully,
truly, faithfully,
diligently, impartially,
diligently, impartially,
perform the duties of the office of sergeant
perform the duties of the office of sergeant
in and for the city of Sumner,
in and for the city of Sumner,
county of Pierce, state of Washington,
county of Pierce, state of Washington.
and such duties are prescribed by law,
Such duties are prescribed by law.
and will support and obey
Support and obey
the law enforcement code of ethics.
the law enforcement code of ethics.
You did it.
I'd like to invite up Deputy Chief Andy McCurdy to pin the badge on Joe Boulay. Here's your certificate of appointment. Congratulations, Joe. I'd like to call up Marcus's wife, Dr. Ariana McDonald, in his badge. And finally, I'd like to call up Justin's wife, Afton, to pin his badge. We have Band-Aids back. Thank you all so very much for your time, and more importantly, your support of these two outstanding individuals. For family and friends, we'll be having some refreshments. I invite you to meet us over in our police meeting room. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We don't get.
Oh, my God.
Thank you. You did. No, couple months.
Everybody. Okay, so we will move down to study session business. Now, number one is Manufacturing and Industrial Center, or MIC Transit Update, and I have Brian Windisch, Community and Economic Director.
Thank you, Mayor Hayden, and City Council. Tonight, we want to present the Manufacturing Industrial Center Transit Update that includes a presentation from our partner in this, Bus Up. And this is something that the council approved as a one-year pilot project for the last mile transit service that operates between the Sumner Sounder Station and our Manufacturing Industrial Center out in the north end. And it's called the Commuter Connector, and it has seen a steady increase in ridership over the one-year pilot project that we've been operating it. And Bobby from Bus Up will be able to go, Bobby Ladderyoung from Bus Up will be able to go into more detail on that. But this is really a question before the council of whether or not to continue to fund the pilot project into a second year. We have, as my understanding, we have funding coming from Pierce County that would cover half the cost. And Bobby and I were on the phone today talking about, what things need to happen in order to continue to market the transit service and work with businesses to grow ridership. Because I recognize that the ridership has been less than expected and hoped for, but it has been growing. So I'll let Bobby explain some of that in great detail. So am I in control then of the slides? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Mr. Larry Young, are you available?
I sure am.
All right.
And Jason, it looks like you've done all the hard work for me. You're going to be my button pusher. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much, Mayor and council members, for inviting me, as Ryan mentioned, to share with you where things stand following our first year pilot of the Sumner Commuter Connector project, which, as he mentioned, is a last mile service designed to connect employers and their employees with nearby Sound Transit Sumner Station. So during my allocated time, I'm going to start by presenting the deck that Jason so kindly brought up here. I'm going to then outline the 3 strategies for accelerating growth in 2024, should it be provided, funded. Then thereafter, I'll allocate some time for answering any questions that you may have. And I do want to note that I do have data on hand, the ridership data on hand, so feel free to ask specific questions if you have them. And I also have on the line with me Will Hutchison, our operations manager, in case there happen to be any more technical questions that I need supplemental support for. Hopefully we can get you those answers tonight. So before I dive into the deck, I want to just tell a short story about one of the employers that's participating in this program.
Yeah, can we ask him? Bobby, can you speak louder or turn your volume up?
Absolutely. I don't think ever in my life I've been told to speak louder. Yes, certainly. Can you hear me okay? Is this better?
It's still pretty quiet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll do my best to articulate.
Hey, Bobby,
Yes.
the volume's up on our end. It actually, you need to go into your settings in Zoom, device settings, and then adjust your mic volume there, and it'll come up.
Okay, thank you. Let me see if I can't do that. One second, I'm looking for it. Check. Is this any better?
Yes,
Yes.
that's better. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no worries. In case, had you not heard me earlier, I'll just repeat my poor joke, which is never in my life have I been told to speak louder, but I'll take it. So I just want to tell a very brief story about one of the participating employers before diving into this deck. The Trust Company is one of the employers located within the MIC that began participating in this program as a means to be able to hire and retain employees in an effort to sustain its just general business continuity. And, you know, in order to fill these roles, the Trust Company has been avidly looking for different work placement programs that are available within Pierce County to help them fill these roles. And they ended up identifying a program that pairs previously incarcerated but now released on good behavior inmates with steady jobs. So they are taking advantage of a particular work placement program that gets them public transportation passes and brings them more, to Sumner Station, where we can then make that last mile connection. Now, what's unique about this is that these workers are not permitted to own a cell phone, nor are they permitted to own a car. And therefore, without our program, these folks would be unable to better themselves, continue bettering themselves, and have a more difficult time reintegrating themselves into society. And, furthermore, may not have had an opportunity to be positive contributing employees within the MIC. So more quantifiably, the trust company started with us with 3 employees that were riding. And then it quickly grew to 9. And today it sits at around 12 that ride every day. And to reiterate, these folks would not have a means to access this job without the Sumner Commuter Connector in place. So I wanted to lead with that because it's quite indicative of the problem that we're trying to solve, that is providing a service to the community on multiple levels. That said, just as a quick reminder for anybody in the room that may not be aware, this service operates Monday through Friday for several hours in the morning and several hours in the afternoon, is designed primarily as a last mile solution to connect commuters like the ones I just mentioned between their work site and Sound Transit's Sumner station. Now, to varying degrees of participation, employers that are involved are the trust company, as mentioned, Damco Maersk, National Oak Distributors, Amazon, REI, and Delanos or DCR, for which myself and in some occasions, Mr. Windish have been on site to do multiple days of on-site promotion and training. Next slide, please. Was there a question?
Yeah, Councilmember Hochstetter has a. Go ahead.
So how many riders do you have from Damco Marish? And can you just go down the line there and say how many riders you have from each one of the participating employers?
Absolutely. The trust company accounts for about 9 of our 14 daily riders on average. Damco, Maersk, National Oak Distributors, Amazon, REI, and DCR all have 1 or 2 employees that ride on different days of the week, less frequently, but the trust company is truly the most reliable participant in the service.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Next slide, please. So, and just a quick reminder of the objectives of this pilot, we had 2, a near-term objective and a long-term objective. The near-term objective was to provide transit, last mile transportation connections for existing and or ready and able job candidates looking to access work that was available within the Sumner MIC and connect them with those MIC-based employers that on the other side of the coin are trying to attract and retain workforce talent, i.e. the trust company. The long-term objective, leverage ridership, demand data that we're collecting during this pilot in order to make a case for reestablishing public transportation in the area and be a leader to other East Pierce County communities. Next slide, please. Oh, I think maybe we went a couple too far. There we go. So where are we following the first year's service? Well, the Sumner Commuter Connector data is reporting that on most days, the bus experiences roughly a 43% occupancy on the 21 passenger vehicle that we have in operation. So the bus is just under half full is a simple way of looking at it, which is, believe it or not, a decent amount above average, the national average for bus occupancy in the United States, which is around 35%. And that's relevant to the service that we have in motion. During October, average occupancy on our vehicle was over 35%, which is showing a month-over-month exponential increase indicated and shown below in the graph. Our service often experiences 100% conversion of those who make a reservation to those who scan their tickets and actually ride. What this demonstrates is that the system for which people are using to make reservations and book their rides, and the system that is then used to issue tickets that are then scanned on the bus, all of this seems to work and flow well for the commuters and seems to be a reliable daily action taken by these commuters. Next slide, please. Some additional context regarding the pilot's first year. The map that you see shown here indicates pin drops for which the communities for which our riders are coming from. So when compared to other piloted transportation projects that are currently underway in our region, such as, for example, the Pierce Transit On-Demand Runner program that requires large sums of funding, several $1 million per year, to run multiple minivans that are on demand and multiple drivers, of course. Our project has been quite successful given the financial leanness and the general efficiency that was required to run the program. So while ridership growth has admittedly, as Ryan mentioned, been slower than we originally hoped for, the program is in fact growing in popularity and utilization, and the trend lines are showing that. Secondly, while financial resources are limiting the transit that we can provide to a single vehicle, providing 7 loops in the morning and 6 loops in the afternoon that operate 5 days a week, we have found a way to reliably accommodate multiple companies that have different shift and start and end time requirements. So it's been pretty impressive to see how we can accommodate multiple companies. Now, as mentioned, the trust company is the heavyweight here, but we have been able to accommodate the others that do have 1 or 2 employees that leverage this service reliably. Lastly, pertaining to this slide, Mr. Windish and I have been invited or attended a couple of different regional meetings, such as a Tacoma Tide Flats transportation meeting with employers that are facing similar challenges in Tacoma, in order to share our learning, share our thoughts and advice on how we believe that we could potentially collaborate with them, or simply to exchange notes and figure out how to better one another's programs. Next slide, please. Also worth mentioning is that we presented this pilot, as we had mentioned at the onset of this program that we would do. We presented this pilot at the Association for Commuter Transportation Conference that was held here in Seattle this past summer. And it appears I have 2022. That was a typo. I meant to do 2023. But our session had standing room only and had roughly 85 attendees of the session. And I had people come up to me following the session and tell me that the work that we are doing is blazing the trail for other communities that are rural and don't have the robust funding as more urban communities, and that they appreciated us sharing our insights. So Sumner was definitely positioned as a leader at this conference, which was nice. Next slide, please. So looking forward, our second year pilot objectives. The key things that we're going to want to do going forward are certainly increase engagement and utilization from the employers that are currently involved. We want to make sure that we are growing by signing on 2 to 3 new employers. Ideally, these employers will be nearby the existing bus stop locations in order to further increase the overall utilization of the service, but without overextending the one bus that we have. So we want to serve as many employers and employees as we can, but without the bus running all over the place and only being able to perform a minimal number of loops. We want to be able to provide the most service and also while serving the most employers and employees. And then, of course, continue to collect, analyze, and report back to the city of Sumner the ridership demand data in order to prepare a proposal that can be shared with you, council, and you, mayor, and with the stakeholders that be in our region in an effort to reestablish public transportation. Next slide, please. And I want to say thank you from myself, and I know Will, who's on the call, feels the same as well, but we want to say thank you particularly to you, Jason, and you, Ryan, but also you, council members and mayor, for your continued support of this pilot project. While we feel that the first year has not been as successful as we would have hoped when compared to national averages and even similarly configured regional programs, what we are doing is impressive. And the meeting that Will and I had with Sound Transit this morning to discuss with them the upcoming parking garage construction certainly showed that Sound Transit and others within Pierce County certainly look to this program as leading by example. So that's exciting. That's what I have for the deck. From there, I want to also mention that diving a little bit deeper, this is not in the deck, but diving a little bit deeper into efforts that'll transpire in 2024, should the program be funded for another year. One, Ryan and I were ideating that regular employer meetings, like the one meeting held at Delano's this past summer, in which multiple issues are addressed. There's multiple topics and a variety of value, for lack of better words, that attracts the leadership from these different employers would be a great way to get folks like the leadership from the trust company to share their testimony for how this program has helped their company and their organization and their commuters, as a means to provide the other leadership at adjacent employers with the value directly from the horse's mouth, rather than hearing it from Ryan, just only from Ryan or myself. It would be great to hear it from an organization that's truly benefiting from it. The second thing will be to work with employers that we've identified as having significant interest, but inability to take part in the program due to the misalignment of the Sounder train schedule and when their shift start and end times occur. For example, Costco. Costco has a great amount of interest in this program and would like to take part in it, but their shift times start around 4 a.m. hours before the Sounder train even begins in operation. So one thing that we could consider doing is working with Costco to launch their own shuttle route that they themselves fund, and then other adjacent businesses such as Sekisui Aerospace that we have also gathered information from and have similar issues, but have employees located in the same area, can share their own route. And so we are beginning to solve the problem within the city of Sumner while it not being out of Sumner's pocket per se. And then lastly, continue to promote and grow the program by fostering engagement with participating employers, and as mentioned in the deck, onboarding 2 or 3 more. So with all of that, I know that there's a lot of information there. I tried to be as concise as I can, or as I could be. I have additional data here, and as mentioned, Will's on the line as well for supplemental technical support should there be more deep dive questions, but certainly open to answering any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Bobby. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Bobby, could you tell us, or Will, could you tell us what the current, I've been gone for a couple months, as you know, but could you give us the current ridership numbers for the month of October, November? Do you know that?
Yes. So I do know that the average ridership, Jason, actually, if you go back to the graph towards the beginning of the slide deck, that actually is the specific numbers, but the average ridership is currently around 14 riders per day, Monday through Friday. Back in September, it was around 12. Prior to that, in August, July, it was around 10. And prior to July, it was pretty dismal, to be honest. But we've had a significant uptick following the summer months. And I would say that this is not abnormal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Cindy.
So, so Bobby, I certainly could tell that this report was written by Bus Up and not by our staff. It has a lot of ways of sort of twisting and inflating things as far as the way I read it. And when you look through the lines, you just said, we've seen great success in the first year. I just don't think you can say you've seen great success. And I don't normally hear those kind of comments from our staff. I get more of a realistic outline of how things have been handled and where they're going. We were sold that we would be getting fares that would eventually help pay for this program. And the way it looks when you just have 14 people over 1 year, I don't think we're ever going to get anything that it'll be where the city will get any reimbursement. But that was part of your sales pitch from the very beginning. I think that it's a beautiful idea. I think it's early. I don't think the demand is here. I think we're the ideal location for this kind of thing, where we have a train station and we have a close, heavy industrial industrial area. But I don't see that our demand has picked up in any way. I know that you've been beating the bushes out there to get more employers. And when you have a list of 5 and you only have one employee using it, that's pretty darn slim. I mean, you'd get more than that would just want to give it a try a few times than just one. The trust company, I think, is an unusual situation where they're getting released prisoners. But I think it's a lot to ask for the citizens of Sumner to be paying for this when, I think when you keep mentioning that you're gathering data to try to get us our bus service back, I think that's a false promise. I think that's totally up to Pierce County Transit. I don't think that your data from running a shuttle bus from here to there is going to help decide that we'll get bus. And people want the buses here in the worst way. And I think that is an inflated promise that your data would help bring that forward. Also, your graph there, I've never seen anybody, when they're comparing 2 sets of numbers, use the same color. How is someone supposed to really tell what's going on with that when you don't have a contrast of any kind that you can really tell? Because the dots are both just, I mean, is the thin line different than the thick line? I get that, but which one's which? So do you want to answer that, or?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I can certainly appreciate your points.
I'm asking you about the graph in particular.
Okay. Yep.
Trying to point out what you planned for and what's real. And if you were proud of what was real, you think you'd have it where we could easily identify it. I feel like it's just kind of a smokescreen is how I feel about it.
Okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. To clarify, the 2 different shades of green, the light color are the number of people that booked. The dark green are the number of people that rode. So, for example, you might have 10 people make a reservation tonight for tomorrow morning, but even though 10 people made reservations today, maybe only 8 show up tomorrow. That's what this graph demonstrates, is the discrepancy between the number of people that perhaps made a reservation, but we want to make sure that people are also showing up and scanning their tickets.
But the line above that says the service often experience 100% conversion of those who make a reservation.
That's
I
true.
mean, so I don't know why you'd have to make a graph out of that. Why wouldn't you just show us how many people are riding each day
Understood.
and how it's steadily improved? And because if people are going to buy a ticket or not buy it, but reserve it, they most likely plan to go to work and plan to use their ticket. So I would say that 100% conversion is pretty normal. I don't know why that would have to be some sort of graph to try to convince us of something. And then on the map that you drop the pins that shows all the areas that people come for that ride it, you have 14 people. You have a lot more pins than 14 up there.
Understood. I'm happy to explain that as well. There are people that create accounts when I'm on site at Amazon or REI or DCR that I'm speaking with, and they create accounts and they register themselves. And when they go through, they fill out a short form. And part of that, in order for us to have the data that I'm presenting to you here, is that they fill out their address. And so what you're seeing here are the people that have created accounts, so we know where they're coming from. That doesn't necessarily mean that they decided to take the leap and start writing.
So that makes the case. This is not a valuable piece of information to us. This is people who just thought that might be something they want to use. You're acting like we're, doing a great job getting them from all over. These are just people who have thought over the idea and have not pulled the trigger and are using it consistently. So that's why I think this is more of a sales job than the normal facts and figures that I get from staff on a normal basis to help make decisions. That's the disappointing part to me.
I can completely appreciate your perspective. If I may just add one additional note to what I was saying when I speak to the amount of success in the first year. For example, the Pierce County runner system runs several vehicles, and they run those something almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if memory serves me correctly. And that program costs millions and millions of dollars. And when Ryan and I were at the Tide Flats meeting that you see referenced here as the bottom point on this slide, their ridership was lower than the ridership we were having. So my point is, and you are totally right, council member. I completely understand your point, but I'm just trying to lend some perspective in the sense that when you consider the amount of budget that is available and the amount of resources that are available, it is quite impressive the amount of people that we've been able to serve on a regular basis for the amount of money available and allocated when compared to multi-million-dollar programs with multiple vehicles and drivers. That said, again,
I think that's comparing apples to oranges. When a transit system knows that small buses are out to pick up small amounts of people and pick up little extras and other people that need extra help, they're always going to have lower. They're never, they don't send a small bus out and pack it to the thing. That's part of their overall system. The rest of the buses are having much more ridership. I think that comparing us to something like that is an unfair comparison. The situation was, as you told us, this was the first one like this in the United States or whatever, that we were going to be a test program for it. So I don't think you need to try to tie us to other bus systems. This was an individual program. So that's what I don't like about how you put your program together to try to get us to continue with this service.
Understood. My apologies.
I mean, I just think that we need the clear facts and so that we can, but not all this fluff that makes it feel like oh, if we do this, we might get the, the regular bus service back, or, oh, we're doing just as good as everybody else. No, we have low ridership. You've been beating the bushes. You may, the city may, and the council may decide to continue to give it a longer term, but I think you have to realize that we're spending a lot of the citizens' money on getting 14 people out to work. And I think that society will change, and I think that there might be a time when gas is a lot more expensive, or the other businesses do something themselves. They could get vans or do things themselves much cheaper than our city spending $140,000 a year transporting one small bus that's under half full on most of its routes. So I'm just letting you know, I'm unhappy with the way your company is presenting this to us. I think that you could have done it in a more fair and clear and concise way, that if your program was worthwhile, you should have been able to give us that kind of information. So thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. And Bobby, this is not a bashing session, but it's, I definitely, I agree with many of the points Councilmember Hochstetter made. Last year, I was cautiously optimistic about this pilot, and I do know that it takes time. I am underwhelmed with what the results have been so far for the amount of money that's been spent. And I am having a very difficult time comparing about $475 a month to subsidize 14 people per person, to subsidize 14 people to get back and forth. At that valuation, it is not sustainable, in my opinion. And just a side comment to that, similar to what Councilmember Hochstetter was mentioning, is that comparing an underperforming program to another underperforming program does not do you any favors. I'm still undecided on whether I support this. I do like the concept. I like the potential that it has, but that potential is not being realized. And I think something significant has to change.
Understood. Thank you very much for sharing.
Any other comments? Oh, Councilmember.
Yes, I just have a couple questions. First, Councilmember Hochstetter mentioned about the number of riders. How many riders do we need, regular riders do we need in order to break even so that the city would not have to pay anything? I know at this point, we're looking at $79,000, I think is there for 2024.
Yeah, great question. Will, if you could work that up while I'm responding, I'd appreciate that. So when we started the program, we had proposed to council that the price to ride would be $6 per ride. Because we started the service with such little traction, we approached Mr. Windisch and asked if he felt it would be okay to lessen that barrier of entry from $6 to $3. What I can tell you is that last month we recollected about $1,500, and that's been true November, October, September. Prior to September, what we were collecting was around $500 or less per month. And the total accumulation of what we collected for 2023 was about $5,500. You're 100% right that I, quote unquote, sold through my pitch the idea that the ticket fares of participating employers and commuters would theoretically pay for itself and at some point completely offset the costs. It's clear that we did not achieve that goal, and we missed it by a far amount.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I'm also curious, you sort of mentioned it a little bit when you talked about the one employer that starts at 4 a.m. I'm very familiar with the train schedule, so I guess I'm just a little concerned. To me, the morning hours look really well. In the afternoon, there is a train that comes in before 3:30. And so to me, it seems to me that that would be a time when an employee that starts really early, they'd probably be ready to go around that time. And there's a little bit of a break between the next train that's heading from Seattle. And I'm just talking about the southbound trains. So are you looking at that to maybe adjust that a little bit? Or is it really about getting additional employers to sign on before those trips can be adjusted a bit?
Yes. The employer that I used as an example there was Costco. Sekisui has a similar shift start schedule, but not quite as graveyard-esque. Costco has people that arrive in the 2 a.m. hour, the 4 a.m. hour, and I believe the 6 a.m. hour, something like this. And so the tail end of the way they stagger their shifts, the tail end of that last shift start time in the 6 a.m. hour could theoretically have access to the program, but Costco just felt that if we can't roll it out to everybody, or at least a considerable percentage of our employees, we're just going to have to pass for now, which made sense. To answer your questions, how we could adjust with that, there wasn't really a way to adjust our service in order to meet Costco's needs, because they were arriving a couple of hours before the train service began. And when they were getting off was as the Sounder train morning services were ending. However, we did approach the subject with Costco and with Sekisui Aerospace's leadership, their willingness to adjust their shift start and end times to see what their appetite would be in order to accommodate their existing workforce and make it possible for future job candidates to be able to access the program. And that was a quick, hard and fast no.
Okay. Okay, so thank you for that. And did you have information about what that number will be, the number of riders needed?
Yep, let me check to see if I have that. One moment. Will is working on it right now, is what he is telling me. So I can certainly circle back to you with that figure, but we're working on it right now.
Sounds good. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other questions, Councilmember Potato?
I'm kind of, I really support what we try to do for the MIC, because they do provide, like you talk about, it's our citizens' money. Well, they're paying 56% of our property tax. And so I would like to, do what we can to support them. But like the others have spoken, 14 people is really too low a number at this point. And you would think after over a year of talking to businesses that there would be, people are either going to be in or not. And I'm glad the trust company has a good program, and I think it's a benefit, but it's almost like each company could have their own Uber that would get people back and forth to the Sounder for a lot less than what we're spending. And so
Absolutely.
I really wanted to support this, but it's kind of hard with the numbers that I see.
As supplemental context, to be brief, prior to us bringing this proposal to you, Mr. Windish and myself had been working with the employers that are currently participating, if even on a minimal level, and ones that are not participating. And I must admit that the the state of the program as it is today is surprising to both Ryan and myself as well, given the level of engagement we had from employers, particularly REI and a couple of others that were willing to share their internal data and provide letters of support. And not to make excuses by any means, but unfortunately, the gusto that we saw prior to the program beginning and what ended up turning into reality, I appreciate that everybody says, I'm out there pounding bushes and knocking on doors, and that's true. But to everybody's point on this call, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's working, and I can appreciate and respect that. But we would have hoped to have a little bit more collaboration, perhaps from the employers as well, and I think that there's a component there.
Okay, Mr. Wills.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a tough decision that council's being asked to make. And unlike other things that the city provides, this may be one of those that we are not going to have a definitive recommendation from staff on how to proceed. Because really this comes down to the policy question of how much do you want to subsidize a service for our community? And I just want to say, being a progressive city means that things that enhance our community through our needed and valued services takes time. And being progressive means that we're going to have successes, we're going to have failures. And, we're doing something that is untested. Obviously, it's not working as we had hoped. I don't think anybody in this room is saying, yeah, this has been a stellar success story. But I think the challenge is trying to figure out, are we still going uphill with our ridership numbers, or are we plateaued and going to sit right at this level? And unfortunately, I don't think anybody in this room or on the call have the ability to answer that question. So the question for you as policymakers is going to be, what's your gut telling you? And is there benefit of giving this more time to work itself out? I too have concerns. When you look at the cost per ride, and I know Ryan and I had talked a lot about this, the cost per ride is astronomical per person right now. Do I think that this program will ever pay for itself? Going back to your question, Councilmember Cole, I don't think it ever will. I think there'll always be some level of subsidy to it. I don't think that's unheard of in transit. It's not unheard of in a lot of city services. So it's a tough decision. And when we go into the mid-biennial budget amendment discussion, we can tell you how we have come up with a path forward for funding if council desires to continue. But that's kind of where we're at this time. And I hope you hear the perspective. And Councilmember Potato, I appreciate you bringing up 56% of our property taxes come from the MIC. I think that is an important note, that we do have a lot of community members. They may not live here at night, but a lot of community members that come to our city every single day, and a lot of jobs and businesses that we're also here to support.
All right.
Thank you, Jason. Also, I do have that figure. It is 108 riders per day. At the initially planned ticket prices, it would have been 54 per day.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything for Bobby? Thank you very much. Appreciate your update. Okay. So we are going to move on to number 2, and that will be Public Work Operations Facility Financing Update. Cassandra Raymond.
Good evening, everyone. Just waiting for the presentation to load up. There we go. Thank you. So tonight I'll be giving an update on ordinance 2870. This is an ordinance that was approved in August of 2023 to issue limited tax general obligation bond anticipation notes. So this was interim financing for the beginning phases of our Public Works Operations Facility. That ordinance was a delegation ordinance, so City Council delegated authority to staff to work to place that request for proposals as well as execute the final documents to close that interim financing. The ordinance provided for a general obligation bond anticipation note up to $8.1 million. The terms were in the maximum of 8.1, a maximum fixed or true all-in interest cost of 5.5%, and a term no later than October 1st of 2026. Working with Public Works, we issued a little over $4 million is what we circulated the request for proposals. Our placement agent circulated that to 34 banks. Because it was a relatively small amount and a short time frame, we had limited interest. We got proposals from 4 banks. Made us a little bit apprehensive at first, but then we noted that Webster Bank came in with a very, very positive offer to issue that debt. So we go. We issued, the final amount was $4,334,000. Proceeds to city were just about $4.3 million, with the $12,000 going to our bond counsel and a little over $21,000 going to our placement agent. We were able to issue that with Webster Bank for an all true interest cost of 5.10%. Again, the maximum under the delegation ordinance was 5.50, so we were able to come in well within that. There are no upfront costs with Webster Bank, and we have an 18-month call. So that means if we want to prepay it within the first 18 months, we'll have a bit of a premium, but our intention is to hold this and then pay this off when we issue the takeout financing, so the final financing for the operations facility. Our final maturity on this is October 1st of 2026. All in all, we were very pleased with Webster Bank's offer. We look forward to working with them. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
So what is bond counsel and placement agent?
Sure. So bond counsel is our legal representation. We specialize legal representation for all of our financing issues. And that is really going through the form of the ordinance. Most ordinances we see are a couple of pages long. The financing ordinance is usually at least 30. And it's a legal debt. It's a legal debt tendered. And so we have bond counsel that really acts as our representation for finalizing that debt issue. A placement agent usually acts as really the marketer of the debt. So that's who has the relationships with all of the issuers, circulates the request for proposals, as well as summarizes, answers questions, and really acts on our behalf to market that proposal. So really we get the widest dissemination of our request, get it into the hands of the most people. And in this case, it worked well for us. Webster Bank is headquartered in Connecticut. It was a very attractive proposal that we got from them. And it's one that, maybe we wouldn't have known to market to.
Oh, okay, good. Well, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Is that a one-time fee, or do you keep them on?
That is a one-time fee. So that's usually, for bond counsel and a placement agent, it's a one-time fee that is set at the beginning of your debt issue. So we have what's called a closing memorandum that outlines the use of the funds as well as the debt service, the repayment schedule, all of the terms, and then also what's going to be paid to the various parties. It can vary, on occasion. We have our own bond counsel. On occasion, we may get a response that says, okay, but we're going to charge you an additional $10,000 to use our bond counsel from the issuer. And so when we saw Webster's proposal with really no upfront additional costs, that kind of factors into the attractiveness of the offer.
Okay, but I just wanted to ask that that's who you're paying to go out and shop for you?
Essentially, yes, they have a variety of other duties, but they're the ones that put together the marketing and circulate it to the issuers to get the request for the responses.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes, so I'm curious, so a little, like $4.3 million was actually issued. There was a need, I think it said for 8.1 million. So was there always, so it's a couple of questions in here. Was there always the intent to go after just this, a little more than half? And if so, does the other, a little bit less than half come from the general fund? How does that happen?
That's a very good question. Thank you. So when we initially were putting together the delegation ordinance, so we were under a little bit of a time constraint. We wanted to go ahead and get the preload of the facility begun as soon as possible. We still had a couple of outstanding questions. The biggest one was whether or not we were going to be approved for a Public Works Trust Fund loan to do the decamp portion on that north parcel of the operations facility. That's a little over $2 million, and that would have factored into this. We did in fact get awarded that construction funding, so we didn't need to issue that part. We also went through, over the past several years, the general fund has paid a portion of the design and property acquisition costs. We looked at whether or not it was financially beneficial to, in essence, repay the general fund for the costs that it had already paid. As we looked at that analysis, the portion that the general fund has already paid is actually consistent with the proportion of the facility that's related to the general fund. So we didn't need to do that reimbursement part. And between those two things, that brought what we actually needed to issue down to that 4.3 mark.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Welcome.
Nice work. Mr. Brown?
What is the maturity date?
So the maturity date is the final date that this would be due. So under the terms of this of the interim financing, we pay interest on an annual basis. And then the full amount of the principal is due no later than October 1st. Our intent is that when we issue the big debt package for construction of the full facility, we'll pay this off with that.
Anybody else? Nope. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no more questions on that one, we will move right on to ordinance number 2874, 2023, 2024 mid-biennial budget amendment. And Cassandra gets the night.
I get to talk about numbers again. I'm
I
good.
know it. She gets all excited.
I have a few slides.
Her eyes pop out.
So I want to thank the Finance and Personnel Committee, who were kind enough to preview this and dive down deep into the details. So what we'll be presenting tonight is an overview of our mid-biennial budget amendment. This is amending our 2023-2024 budget that was adopted on December 5th of 2022. Why this amendment? First, it's just good transparency. We do quarterly budget amendments to keep our budget programmatically current, as well as to ensure transparency with both council and our community. In addition, specifically for the mid-biennial, this is required by RCW for any cities that are budgeting under a biennial budget, so a 2-year model. But again, these budget amendments provide council really a timely and transparent view of our budget needs. I think the quarterly process is great. Instead of coming to Finance Committee with a 3-hour mid-buy, we were able to keep it to an hour. So this is our opportunity to review changes, make programmatic updates, and revisit and revise our forecasts. Again, reviewed in detail by the Finance and Personnel Committee. And really what all of this boils down to is it's an integral part of our overall financial management process. The amendment at a glance, we actually on this one don't have any transfers in and transfers out. So by fund, you can see the revenue as well as the expenditure. We're asking in this mid-biennial to recognize a total of $6,339,760 in revenue and a little over $6.7 million in expenditures. We always start with the general fund. As we started reviewing the general fund for programmatic and updates that needed to be made, one of the really first things that we have been eyeing really all year since we adopted the budget was our insurance. So this is insurance that is through the Washington City's Insurance Authority. And we're going to discuss that first.
Thank you, Cassandra. So just as a reminder, the city receives its liability and property and auto insurance through Washington City's Insurance Authority. It's a risk pool comprising of about 165 members. It includes various layers of insurance that ultimately provides the city with a $20 million liability cap. So like I said, we obtain our liability, property, auto, and cybersecurity insurance through them. And then since 2020, insurance costs have increased extremely rapidly. And this is not a problem that is unique to WCA. This is really an industry-wide problem. You may have noticed it when you pay your auto insurance or house insurance. But the risk pools that insure school districts and cities and counties are definitely feeling a pinch from this. Hey, Jeff. Sorry. Thank you. So to demonstrate that, back in 2020, we were paying about $330,000 for all those different lines of insurance that we purchased. Next year, we were anticipating paying $986,000. That's a 206% increase in roughly 4 years. So what's causing this? Primarily what we like to call nuclear verdicts. So these are large jury verdicts awarded to people that are filing claims against cities and counties. A lot of them deal with use of force by police or roadway design. The other thing that's causing this is some high dollar losses in underinsured properties, which is causing some doubt in the insurance market. And what I mean by that is you might have a building that you had insured for, let's say, $250,000, but when it, if it was to burn down, it's really valued at $1 million. So you have a huge discrepancy there. To fight that, I can tell you that WCIA is working with each one of their members, and every 5 years they are on site doing physical cost assessments for every single piece of our physical property to make sure we keep those valuations correct. So how are annual costs calculated? WCIA annually conducts an actuarial study to determine the amount of funds needed. Once they determine that, they go out and they actually shop the market. They go to London every single year and they shop the insurance market to make sure that they have multiple layers of coverage, including a self-insurance layer, to provide all their members with that $20 million liability level. Then the WCIA Budget Committee reviews that. It makes a recommendation to the executive board for rate increases. I'll tell you, I've been on the WCIA Budget Committee for 5 years now, so I've been involved in every single one of these rate increases. So yes, I did vote for them, but it was necessary to make sure that the risk pool remains solvent. Once the Budget Committee makes their recommendations, it does go to the executive board who adopts that base increase. So in 2024, that base increase is 25%. Now that isn't what each member actually pays. It's based on your loss history. So it's the base plus or minus 15%. That's why you can see that in Sumner, our 2024 rate increase was 37%. Most of the members fall upwards of the base, right? Because they have claims, and we haven't had a lot of claims that the city or WCIA has paid out, but that doesn't mean that we're not, using their pre-defense services. We have responded to claims which take up attorney time that WCIA bills us for through this loss history. So what can we do? There's a few things, and we did reference some of these in our legislative agenda, like opposing state legislation that would expand the city's tort liability, as well as supporting legislation to reform tort liability, really to restore that balance between protecting the harmed individuals with reasonable verdicts and appropriate defenses. Over 30 states in the country have that type of tort liability reform that has been passed in the last few years. We need to continue a strong risk management practices. So that's good roadway design, policy consistency. So when we have a policy, make sure that we are following it consistently and in the same way every single time. Employee training. Sorry, when I go back to policy consistency, when I say that, it's not just personnel policy. It's also when we talk about sidewalk damage, right? When somebody reports a sidewalk problem to us, that we're making sure that we are going through a process the same way every single time. And the last thing we can do is adjust coverage. So currently, for a number of years, our property deductible, this is for like buildings and crime and whatnot, has been $5,000 per incident. We have the ability to adjust that deductible from 5,000 to 25, you can even go up to 50 and 100,000. But what we're going to be recommending is that we adjust our deductible to 25,000. And the reason why is we have found that most of the time, if we have a property claim, it's less than 5,000. So we're not even hitting our insurance, or it's well in excess of 25,000. So a good example of one that we're working through right now is we had a porta potty catch on fire at the sports complex, which damaged all the electrical system out there for the lighting, the field lights, not okay, well exceeded 25,000. So by doing that, by changing the deductible, we are going to recognize about $155,000 savings across all of our funds. So it's some risk assessment, right? How many claims do we have that exceed that versus not? And really, we don't anticipate, we've never had multiple $25,000 claims in a year. Never since I've been in my upstairs position, so since 2013. We'll say that that savings is across all funds and with the largest impact to the wastewater treatment facility. That's because when you look at our property, we have a lot of high dollar equipment and buildings at the wastewater treatment facility. So while that 155,000 will go across all funds, because the largest impact is the wastewater treatment facility, Bonnie Lake will also benefit from their share because they pay for their proportional share of those insurance costs.
Did you say how much you upped the deductible to?
Yeah, up to 25,000.
Okay.
So while insurance will still go up, we're gonna try to tamp it down a little bit for now.
Can I ask a quick question before you go on? So you mentioned that WCIA, I mean, it is about insurance, but it's other things as well, like maybe they provide you with legal counsel. But I thought I heard you say that if they provided legal counsel or advice or whatever, that the city would still have to pay for that? It's
Yeah, I
not
didn't
part
choose
of the
my words.
package?
Yeah, I didn't choose my words very well. So
Okay.
when they provide us legal counsel in what's called the pre-defense program,
Mhm.
or if they provide us legal counsel in response to a claim, those costs incurred go against our loss history.
Okay,
We don't pay them per se, but that affects our loss rating.
okay. So you're really sort of kind of billed in a sense, but
We pay one way or another.
one way or the other. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so by upping the deductible for the insurance coverage, we're actually able to strip that top line out of our general fund changes. And so when we look at our general fund, we have some operating changes. This includes external legal services that are associated with the Ryan House activities, development services, plan review. This really is a recognition of the actual cost for external plan review that we use whenever we have, we need development services plan review to do workload capacity or a specialized plan review that we need to outsource. These costs end up being recouped through our building and permit fees. And so what we do is we review this on a routine basis and then recognize the actuals that are being spent. That third line is the bus up service. This includes $79,000 in revenue and then recognizing the other 70, and then recognizing the total expenditure of $158,000. In our legal department, we have some professional development costs. And then in Metro Animal Services, we have a 30-cent per capita increase in 2024 as a lead agency in that partnership. We also pay that per capita increase. It's paid out of our police department in the general fund. And so that's an additional $3,200 in the general fund. Happy to answer any questions on the operating changes before we move into those last two items.
Do we have any questions? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So that $3,200, That's just being put into Metro,
Yes.
right? It's just a
Yes.
little, we're collecting little fees even from ourselves.
Yes.
To put in, to run that. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. We pay ourselves. The money goes out of the general fund as an expense and goes into the Metro Services Fund as a revenue.
Anybody else? Nope. Mr. Brown?
Yeah. Just fund,
Yeah, this is, for any mid-biennial changes in 23. But it doesn't also include the quarterly budget amendments that you've been doing. So this is just getting us through the rest of the year.
Well, so actually some of these cross both 2023 and 2024. So some of these changes may be for the entire biennium. For example, the professional development in our legal department covers both 2023 and 2024. The per capita for Metro, that's an adjustment for 2024.
that's,
Mhm. So the bus up line here is specifically for 2024.
It's a good segue.
Thank you.
So if council wanted to continue bus up for another year, we have, it's gonna cost about $158,000. The city contribution, for that would be 79,000, and then the county council just last week in their biennial budget approved $79,000 of county funds. Pierce County Council sees value in this because it does serve areas outside of municipalities and serves unincorporated Pierce County because some of their riders come from outside of incorporated cities. I will say right now, you may remember earlier this year, the council allocated about $52,000 of ARPA funds to the Bus Up program to help offset this year's general fund contribution. That money still remains in this line item. So if you pair what's left in the 23 amount with what the county contribution is, we actually have enough to pay for Bus Up for the year without new dollars being found.
Mr. Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. Jason, a quick question on that. With Pierce County's contribution, is that considered as a grant that would not expect repayment, or do the revenues that come from Bus Up get split between the two contributors?
So it is a direct allocation, so it is a grant from Pierce County. There's no expectation to repay that. In a practical sense, I would imagine that any revenue that we collect, we'd probably split 50-50 with the county and not bill them for that share.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was just curious.
Mhm.
Anybody else before we move on? Go ahead, Jason.
So,
You gotta be
On
quick
the-
on the draw.
huh?
You gotta be quick on the draw around here.
On the previous slide, you had the legal services for the Ryan House. Is that pertaining to the lawsuit brought by the Citizens Committee?
Yeah, that covers our legal services for the Growth Management Hearings Board petition, as well as the LUPA, the land use petition, that are underway right now.
Oh, okay.
Anybody else?
But,
Go ahead.
but that's just an estimate, isn't it?
Correct.
You've just tried to estimate what you think, and there might be a little more and a little less, right?
Is that it? Anybody else? All right.
So then after we look at the operating changes, then we move on to these final two items. And these are really pass-throughs of state shared revenues that have been collected by the city of Sumner for more regional programs.
I'll touch on those real quick. First one is the opioid settlement. You may recall that the city will receive $436,000 over the next 15 years. This is the result of a class action suit against manufacturers and distributors of opioids. All of this is set forth in what they call the One Washington Agreement. So all the cities and counties participated jointly, or most cities had the option to opt out and do it on their own, but most cities participate in this One Washington Agreement. The settlement funds have to be used for they have limitations of what they can be used for, include substance use disorder treatment, the treatment support such as transportation, housing, prevention, messaging, education, or other uses such as training, leadership efforts, and research. Funds can be pooled for greater efficiency, and any fund use has to be reported to the Countywide Opioid Abatement Council for annual review. That Opioid Abatement Council does not determine how the monies are spent, just whether or not they fit under the criteria in the One Washington Agreement, one of those approved uses. The county, knowing that a lot of the smaller cities don't get a whole lot of money on an annual basis, is offering to allow cities to pool their resources to do one notice of funding availability annually to use these funds. And they're still working out the details, but the hope would be that we could have a representative on the staff committee that is reviewing those notice of funding availability responses. So what I'm recommending is we allocate the funds collected in 2022, which is $17,350, to Pierce County for that regional NOFA process. I intentionally did not include the 23 numbers because I'm trying to get it so we're allocating funds with the biennium. So for the 25-26 biennium, we would allocate 23 and 24 and so on. Any questions about that one?
Have you heard that they have any ideas on how to spend that money? Any plans?
They have a lot of ideas, and the last document I saw was about 3 pages worth of different ways that they could use the funds to support opioid addiction.
Do they think they're going to get enough from the little cities to do something substantial?
I think it's more important to realize that the county has substantial money. So
Okay.
it's using our little bits that we can add to it just to make sure that our community gets the benefit from these funds, because that's important, right? We don't want all the money going to West Pierce County or City of Tacoma proper, right? We want the money spread throughout the county to serve as many people as possible that are affected by this.
Thank you.
Okay. The next one is the Affordable Housing Sales Tax Credit. This is also known as House Bill 1406 money. This is a state shared revenue. It's a portion of sales tax. The city will benefit from these funds for 20 years. And it started being collected in 2021. So about that same time, a number of the cities in the county created the South Sound Housing Affordability Partnership, or SHAPE. And one of their main goals has been helping with policy development, and they help, promote affordable housing code amendments and policies throughout the county and try to get some consistency with that. But the other vision when SHAPE was created was creating a capital fund similar to other housing authorities that are in King County and Thurston County. And that is actually up for a vote this Friday. Mayor Hayden is on the SHAPE executive board, so she'll be voting on that proposal to create that fund. And how that would work is we would take our $1406 and we would transfer them to SHAPE, who they're administered by Pierce County from their finance department, who would then run an annual notice of funding availability process to provide opportunities to leverage these dollars for affordable housing efforts, typically to build affordable housing. So we're recommending allocating the funds collected in 21 and 22 to them, which is $125,000. Once again, that same methodology of holding it back, collecting, and then allocating it during the biennial budget process. The other advantage to that is it'll give us some opportunity to see how these dollars are used regionally and not just committing us long-term year over year. Because we also have the option of, in the future, if we didn't want to participate in the SHAPE Capital Fund, we could do something, do our own notice of funding availability and do this.
Go ahead.
So who can apply to that fund?
It's largely nonprofits, so
Okay.
anything from,
That might build a housing unit. Okay. Okay, that's what I was hoping it was. I just didn't know if I understood, because it just says it's a funding opportunity, so
yeah.
it just,
private-
it's gonna pool, then people can, and there'll be someone who decides, they apply and someone decides if it's worthwhile.
Yeah, and it can be for profits, but in used to subsidize as long as they keep a number of units affordable for X amount of years. So there are programs like that set up.
So that is it. That is it for the general fund. I'm happy to answer any questions on the general fund listing before we move on to the other funds.
Any questions for Cassandra?
We get that, just that for her this.
Are you? Are you good?
Mhm.
And I don't see anything up there from Mr. Reed, so I think you're free to go.
So then we move on into our other funds. Fund 302 is our sidewalk capital. In our sidewalk capital, we're requesting $80,000. This is to begin design efforts for sidewalk repair at West Valley. That is what this picture of. I apologize, it's kind of small, but you can actually see where the sidewalk is beginning to crumble over the edge. We have placed some supports over on the side, but we'd like to go ahead and at least get started on the design portion of identifying the best repair for this location. And then we'd like to recognize $350,000 that we were able to bill Sound Transit through our capital agreement with them for Sound Transit station access improvements. In Fund 310, this is our Parks and Trail Capital. Friar Avenue, this is a project that I believe has been going on since I've been here. And we will be recognizing a grant award for construction of a little over $5.3 million with the associated expenditure, which is really exciting to see that progress on that trail. In Fund 320, this is our street capital. We'll be recognizing additional revenue from the Federal Highway Administration Hazard Safety Program for Maple Street pedestrian improvements. This is pedestrian as well as the signal back plates. Additional revenue, additional grant award of $280,000. We're also going to recognize the expenditure of a little over $616,000. This project is primarily grant funded, but when we adopted the budget back in December of 2022, we were unsure of the timing of this project, so we didn't program in the capital cost. So we're doing that now. And then recognizing Sound Transit contribution that we're able to bill for and collect in 2023 for bicycle lanes, and that's $500,000. And then I believe this is the last in our capital, but this is Fund 325. This is our facilities capital. The first one is recognizing $100,000 in revenue. Kudos to our Public Works Department. This is a Department of Commerce grant that we had actually applied for and was obligated several years ago for a float barn. Drew McCarty, as she was going through the files, realized that this grant, although several years old, would still be applicable to our operations facility because we still will be using part of the facility for storage of that equipment. So she reached out to the Department of Commerce who confirmed that, yes, we could still obligate that funding. So that was a great thing to see. We'll be recognizing $100,000 for that grant. And then also in Fund 325, we will be de-obligating both the revenue and the offsetting expenditure for the Ryan House Pierce County LTAC grant. This was the grant that expires at the end of 2023. So we'll be removing that off of our budget lines. Any questions on capital before I move on to utilities?
No, we're good.
So as we move into our utilities in Fund 401, this is our water fund. Both for staff capacity as well as operating efficiency, we've placed a job shack at our Central Well location. So we have rental costs for that job shack for both 2023 and then through 2024 of $23,000. At our Central Well, we have a media replacement. So this is replacing the filter media of the Central Well of $150,000. And then finally, Public Works is requesting $310,000. This is to complete the conversion of our radio read meters. At this point in the program, most of them have been converted, but the more difficult, larger, more expensive ones were kind of saved until the end. So this is for funding that, as well as funding our inventory of service meters. This project, the conversion to radio read, has been ongoing for quite some time, and we're actually reaching end of life on some of the existing meters. So this is for both the new inventory to complete the conversion, as well as to begin replacing those that are reaching end of life.
Deputy Mayor.
It's probably for Public Works and not you, but do we have radio read on the meters out in the industrial area too? I only see them at home on the streets.
I believe we have some.
Your mic's on.
Yes. Yes. Ugh. Excuse me.
Thank you.
In our wastewater fund, this is Fund 402. Our treatment facility staff reached out to Puget Sound Energy, applied for a grant for the purchase of ammonia probes for $34,000. So they received that grant, so we've received the funding as well as acquired the item. So we are recognizing that activity. And then we have some additional purchase of some chemicals to improve our efficiency and actually reduce our energy load. That's $25,000. And then $100,000 is being requested for equipment replacement. And really, this is one of those instances where we've not necessarily identified the specific equipment, but when we're looking at the treatment plant, almost everything they do is very important, very timely, and usually expensive. So this is really establishing that budget. So if a piece of equipment goes down or needs a major repair, we're able to accommodate that without waiting for an additional budget amendment process. The treatment plan is one where you want to be sure that you are not having an interruption of services. And so we want to give them that kind of that efficiency to be able to do that. And then in Fund 440, this is our animal control fund. This is just a full circle back to that conversation about the 2024 per capita increase. We saw a small increase in the general fund as our police department paid for the city's portion, but the overall portion is an increase of $36,000, $258 into the animal control fund. And that's the per capita increase for all of our partner cities. And then finally, in Fund 551, this is our information technology fund. Our staff reached out and applied for and received a cybersecurity grant. This is through the Washington Department of Emergency Management, with funds really originating from Department of Homeland Security at the federal level. And this will allow us to deploy the Microsoft Defender for cybersecurity. So this is a $32,000 grant. The revenue will be paying for the $32,000 expense. Our next steps, again, we reviewed this on November 16th at our Finance Committee. Reviewing it tonight, we'll have a public hearing at our next regular meeting on December the 4th, and then the ordinance will be before you for action on December the 11th. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of those line items.
Any more questions? Nothing? You good?
Patrick is back to go.
Nope, Patrick's not there.
He's,
All right.
he's there. He didn't raise his hand.
There he is.
So Mayor, if I could just put a plug in, because I know Bus Up is on everybody's mind tonight. It is in this budget amendment. If council would like to make an amendment, please contact Cassandra so she can make sure that we have all the language that you need for it. And then if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me or Mr. Winrich.
Okay. All right,
Thank you.
thank you. That's a lot of stuff. City Administrator report.
Just one thing, let me turn my mic on. One thing, just a reminder, we have the Santa Parade this Saturday. In your email, Lana gives you some instructions on where to meet the fire truck if you want to participate in that, and the fire truck will bring you back to City Hall as well. So plenty of parking around here.
Awesome. I'll be there. Okay, anybody have any council meeting agenda items? Nothing? Nothing? We're all good? Patrick, you're good?
What'd you say? Whether we're gonna make it a meeting,
Yeah, do you have any issues with the next upcoming meeting? No?
I just want to remember to do, I want to remember to do the committee. CD looks like it's canceled.
Okay. Public Works is on, CD's canceled, and that's committee meeting agenda. Anything else?
So it's public safety.
Public safety is also canceled.
I think is finance.
Still on.
I believe Finance Committee is still on for now.
Okay.
You never know though.
Never get a break. All right. Okay, no executive session tonight? And I guess we are adjourned at 7:30, 7:40. I need a digital clock. That's all I need.